Okay, it is 1:30, so we are going to go ahead and start. Thank you. Welcome to our top 10 export mistakes and how to avoid them webinar. And we are so glad that you guys are here with us. As many of you guys know, you guys have been here for a while coming to our sessions. It's an interactive webinar and a Q&A session. So you guys can start submitting your questions anytime throughout. You can do them right now. You can hit that Q&A button. It should be at the top of your screen or bottom of your screen and send those in. If we do not get to your questions today, we will definitely answer those outside of this webinar. So make sure that your name and email is in that question. If you want to ask it anonymously, you can do that as well. Just make sure to reach out to us afterwards if we do not get to your questions today. So while you're submitting some of your questions and getting acclimated to the screen, I will talk a little bit about Scarborough real quick. So Scarborough is a full-service international and domestic transportation provider. We are also a U.S. and Mexican customs broker. We also have warehousing and fulfillment service capabilities. So we are also known for our expertise in customized solutions. We're headquartered in the heart of America with offices across North America, and we have close partners in every major port in the world. We will be sending out a recording of this webinar along with the presentation and some other resources. So as long as you have registered for it, you will receive a copy. Today, we are lucky to have Angelica and Patrick. They both bring a wealth of knowledge and years of experience in export operations. And you guys are welcome to reach out to them for a free export consultation after the call as well. Patrick, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Kim. My name is Pat Colligan. I'm the Director of Global Accounts here at Scarborough International. I've been with Scarborough International for a little under 14 years now. I got my start in the industry about 25 years ago in the New York area. I'm a licensed customs broker and a certified customs specialist. And really our goal here today is to help you promote your export product and really make you feel comfortable with export compliance. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to our main speaker, Angelica.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here with you today, and thank you for joining us in this webinar. And we do hope to clarify some of your questions and doubts that you have while exporting. We carefully select the 10 common mistakes exporters, and we'll be discussing them in each order that they appear on your screen. We'll be happy to clarify any question you may have throughout the webinar. If we run out of the time, don't worry, we'll address your questions via email after. So please send them as many questions as possible. The first mistake is not getting to know your buyer. There's three core questions you should be asking yourself when you're engaged in export. What, where, and who? So do you know the commodity you're intending to export? If you're not sure, if you're not the manufacturer, does the manufacturer provide you a good description of the goods? So you had a full understanding what are the commodities being shipped. Another good question is where you are exporting. Do you know the country where this cargo is heading to? Is this country a sanctionary country? Has an embargo? Is it a risky area? Those are very important questions to be asked. Very importantly also is who will receive your item? Do you know the person who's buying this cargo? Are they being the end user, or they're going to be reselling this cargo at destination? And another question that's very important is why this cargo is being purchased. Do you know the intentions of the company purchasing this cargo? What they're going to be doing with this commodity? Asking yourself those questions, it may raise you a lot of red flags. It's important to recognize the red flags when engaging in export. I'll bring it up a few examples. So the customer or purchasing agent is not offering you enough information about who's going to be the end user of this product. That's a very big red flag. Another thing that you can be recognized is the product's capability do not fit the buyer's line of business. So for example, if a small bakery is placing an order for several sophisticated lasers or power tools, it does not fit their line of business. So you might be questioning yourself, why is exactly they're buying this commodity for? If the buyer has no or little business background, buyer does not have an online presence, use Google as your friend as much as you can. It's easy to find a social media nowadays, a web page. If your buyer is not anywhere in the internet, question yourself, is this company legit? If something doesn't look right, if you go with your guts, if something doesn't feel right, question yourself, is it really worth doing business with this company?
Excuse
go
me.
ahead.
It's all the exports that are handled through Scarborough International, every party that's within that transaction is actually screened through denied parties list and such. And you also, as an exporter, can be able to do this through export.gov. And that's a very important part to make sure that you're not dealing with any nefarious companies.
Thank you, Patrick. Another aspect that you may be looking for is deemed the export rules. Be aware that any type of communication that you share via email, via phone, such as sharing technology, blueprints, research and disclosure information might be considered as well as an export. So be aware who you're trading this information even before engaging in export of the tangible goods. I know like a lot of universities or high technology research companies, they engage in a lot of research products and they might end up trading some information with overseas. Just be very careful, making sure you're allowed to trade that information before you do so. And for those companies that hire employees, foreign employees, making sure that they're not dealing with exports to the foreign countries, because only persons with a permanent resident status or U.S. citizenship are granted status as protected individuals, and they do not fall under the deemed export rules. So universities can really get in trouble with like students that are doing research and trading information that not should be with overseas.
Yeah, it's quite important. That university thing led me to a story I heard. It's actually not a story; it's a true story. That many years ago, a professor of a major leading university was going ahead and just teaching his class as usual. However, he had a Chinese national that was a student, and he wound up being imprisoned due to the fact that the information that he was providing that student was restricted. So it's quite a scary story that I heard that I thought I'd bring up.
Go on. Thank you, Angelica and Patrick.
Continue with our red flags. If something does not look right, what to do in this case? Well, we have the U.S. Department of Commerce that we should be reporting. Any type of business that does not look right, they should be able to help you and guide you. If it's okay to proceed with that transaction or to really bring that red flags to the light, and if there's really something sketch going on, they'll be able to guide you through the process. Here's the main phone line for the U.S. Department of Commerce. They do answer the calls. They do answer emails. Please feel free for any question you have to contact them directly. They're the best contact to clarify any question you have with export process, licensing, and other further questions you may have.
Can I pop in real quick? We do have a question. This kind of goes along the line with the export.gov and being able to check yourself. Somebody asked, does export.gov perform live or near daily screenings of foreign entities? My understanding was no, it often only checks a first time.
You know what, I'm not, I have to say, I have to research that question and get back to you. I know that our systems, you know, that in our software that we transmit our export clearances through, those screenings are being, you know, done on a refreshed basis. So those lists that we're getting from different agencies of the government are being refreshed pretty constantly.
Thank you.
All right, so we're gonna move forward to our second mistake, which is while selecting your Incoterms. So Incoterms are often mentioned as terms of sale, and it's a global recognized guideline to help sellers and buyers to agree on responsibilities of a sale. Incoterms, they were designed to facilitate communication between seller and buyer, so it's not a law. Therefore, there's no regulations that enforce the use or obligations of the Incoterms. So Incoterms are used to determine either who's paying for the transportation and who's liable during the transportation. So the common mistake I see is that when choosing Incoterm, the seller and the buyer, they only think about who's paying for the cost, and they forget about the liability. And that can get really tricky in damaging situations. Sometimes the seller and the buyer forget to agree upon like who's gonna be taking care of the insurance. They forget the liability part, and that creates a problem. So here's our 2020 Incoterm chart. Incoterms are updated every 10 years, and the newest version was just released last September and will take effect in January 1st, 2020. Since Scarborough will be putting an Incoterm 2020 webinar that discusses the difference between the Incoterms 2010 and 2020, I will be not discussing the changes on this webinar. So as the focus is the type of Incoterms to choose at this time. Scarborough also offers customized Incoterm training, so please feel free to email us if you're interested, and we'll be sending you the link to sign up. Starting with the E and F terms, Patrick, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to kind of hit on, the term that we typically recommend to an exporter, is those, what's in red, those C terms. And the reason being, while you do have, some liability when it's on the water and such, but you're in control then. You're choosing the provider, you're driving everything, you're setting up, what milestones that you need to know about and what, when you want to notify your client of certain things. And it shows your client that, you know how to, you know what you're doing. You have people in place to get the cargo to wherever they need it, or to whatever port they want it to go to. And it also, at the end of the day, can be an area for a small profitability for the exporter, because you are providing an additional service now. You're not just selling a product, but you're selling freight. So you can, possibly add a small percentage onto the freight charges that you're passing along.
Now, Patrick, would you ever recommend to export on D terms or DDP terms?
I would not recommend a DDP term, just because that you are, now getting involved in, duties and taxes and GST and VAT overseas, that you kind of, it's really left best for, the importer, that side. They know the rules and regulations and customs formalities over in the country that they're residing in. DAP is fine. It's again, you're taking on a little more risk because you have to get it delivered. So for whatever reason, maybe there's a trucker strike somewhere and you can't get it delivered timely, then like who's paying for those storage costs that may occur.
Thank you for that clarification.
Just to add a little bit more on Incoterms, just a best practice that I see in a daily, just making sure you and whoever is the buyer is on the same page with the interpretation of the Incoterms. I see in my daily tasks that sometimes they'll agree upon a Incoterm, but they're not on the same page what the Incoterm means. So make sure you spell out, like we're gonna ship the CPT, so it's door to port, airport, not include insurance. Just make sure you guys are on the same page and have it as in written for your records.
And we see a lot of, ex-works terms here at Scarborough. I think it's pretty common, that the U.S. exporter really just wants to say, hey, it's ready, come and pick it up, which is fine. But that doesn't mean that you're not liable for export regulations. You still are the U.S. principal party of interest because you're getting the financial benefit of the merchandise or the exportation. So, that just, be reminded that if you sell on an export's term, you still got to be careful as to, what you're exporting and, who you're exporting to and such.
All right, let's move forward then to our third mistake, which is assessing risk and choosing payment methods. Assessing risk and choosing the right payment methods is a delicate portion of the export process. So here we're going to discuss a little bit the methods to assessing risk and a few methods of payment that make sure your export process goes more secure. So let's first talk about assessing risk. So the three major risk assessments to investigate is the country, the customer, and the foreign bank. So when you look into the country, just access the general economy situation of the country. For example, countries with a high inflation, they tend to be less stable in the economy. I'm not going to say that you're selling to a country with a high inflation and we're not going to be paid, but risks are higher. So you should be taking that into consideration. Another aspect is political issues that might interfere in the economic stability of the country. It's another aspect to be looking at. When you're looking at customer risk, make sure the company is legit and has an online presence, as I mentioned before. How is the financial result of the company? Does the company was able to provide you financials or credit reports, trade reference or bank reference, anything that you can grab a hold and say, okay, this company is legit. This company has been working with the international bank before, and it really sounds like they have been doing this before. Develop a relationship with your client. Were you able to get in a phone call with them? Were you able to set up a meeting? Are they interested to get to know your company? Did they ask you for samples before making a larger purchase? Anything that shows that the client has engaged to know more what they're buying. Same with them, like, are they interested to show more their company to you? Presenting the people that you're going to be dealing on a daily basis, who's the people you're going to be doing business with. Foreign bank risk, if you are using a letter of credit collection, using a foreign bank will be needed. And you need to look for a good sized bank with stability, integrity, and the bank should not be listed in OFACA or BIS list. Some banks can be blacklisted due to USA sanctions, and you don't want to send a letter of credit for this type of bank and then run in issues because your bank cannot collect from the other bank at destination.
Yeah, letters of credit are a great tool to control the payment of the merchandise. They don't typically work too well with a speedy transaction like air freight. We see it much more on ocean freight. Air freight, we typically see, payment prior to, delivery or so on and so forth. But LCs, we also have done a webinar on that you're free to access on our YouTube channel that goes into those in a lot more in depth.
Thank you, Patrick. Discussing a little bit now on how to choose your payment method. So cash in advance is the most secure and preferred type of payment for the seller. It's a good method for new buyers. Buyer must trust the seller will then send the shipment after the funds are received. It's not a very good method of payment if you are in a strong competitive business environment. They might be obtaining credit from a other company, but it's something to think of. Open account, it's most security preferred type of payment for the buyer, because the buyer, at the same time that you're assessing the risk of selling to them, they might be assessing the risk of buying from you. So this method of payment allows them to receive the cargo, and then they will pay the entire shipment once the cargo is received at destination. You are more exposed in this type of method of payment, of course, and you run the risk of their never returning, never paying. And it is a little bit more difficult to collect a payment for a foreign country than actually is domestically. A middle ground is a documentary collection. You have either two types, the site drafts or time drafts. So site drafts is you send a document to the bank. You do not release the document to the buyer. And the bank will only release the document to the buyer when the payment is received. The bank does not have an obligation to pay for the shipment on the buyer's behalf, but they hold the document until the payment is received. That guarantees that the seller gets paid. Be careful on the type of INCOTERMs you're choosing when selecting this type of payment. If you're choosing a D terms and you're responsible for destination charge, you can run across a lot of storage charges and demurrage. Time draft is just a step above of open account. So the documents are sent to the bank, the shipment gets delivered to the buyer, and they agree upon a date that the payment will be collected. The bank will then collect the payment and revert to the seller. The bank, again, does not have an obligation to pay the seller if the buyer doesn't come through. The most secure is letter of credit, which is most used when sellers aren't confident on the buyer's ability to make a payment. The buyer can also request the letter of credit for the seller if they want to finance against it. And there's some countries, regulations that mandate the use of letter of credit because it's a way that they control the funds going to the country. Some companies just prefer to do letter of credit. So it's a matter, whatever choosing the payment methods, whatever works for the seller and the buyer and the regulations of the country. Patrick, do you want to add anything?
No, I think you covered that pretty thoroughly. Good job.
Okay, awesome. Just adding to the letter of credit here, another important point. So just making sure when you're submitting a letter of credit, is the legal binding is done before you started the shipment. If you ship it before, the bank may refuse to accept the payment obligation on your behalf. So step 4, here we're going to be looking at classifying our products correctly. I feel like this is what shippers most struggle with. It's finding which category their commodity falls into. So what is the commerce control list? Indeed, it's a list of the categories and product groups used to help shippers to determine whether an export license is needed from the U.S. Department of Commerce prior to the exportation of the goods. So again, you have to do your due diligence prior any export of the goods before it's loaded in a vessel, before it's leaving any USA soil. The classification of the commodity is named ECCN, which stands for Export Control Classification Number. If your commodity does not fall under any of the categories or subgroups of the Commerce Control List, your commodity might be EAR 99, which indicates the commodity is subject to Export Administration regulations, but not specifically described on the Commerce Control List. Again, if you have any difficulty classifying your product, if you are not confident you classified it the correct way, please contact the BIS office. They have a dedicated desk to help shippers to classify their commodities. You can also visit their website. They have a lot of helpful information. What is the USAPI description? What is the USAPI? USAPI stands for United States Principal Party of Interest. So if USPPI can be the seller, the manufacturer, or the distributor. I often get questions about what if I sold my commodity to another company in the United States and they decided to ship this cargo overseas. In that case, you are not the USPPI because you're not the one engaging to the export. I would say the last company in the United States shipping to overseas, it is the USPPI. Just making sure you have records of that transaction selling from domestic to domestic.
So Angelica, just to confirm, in an ex-works routed transaction, the USPPI is not responsible for the AES. Is that correct?
The USPPI is always responsible for the EEI, but in case if a company A sells a commodity to company B and company B is still within the US, decides to resell the commodity overseas, that company B becomes the USPPI.
Yeah, so I'll kind of further go into that a little bit because I think it's an important question. As the USPPI in a routed export transaction, you are still responsible to provide the forwarder that your customer has chosen with certain data elements. And we're going to touch on this later. So actually, I'll let you go ahead and I think we have this whole slide on routed export transactions, which will really clarify the topic.
Okay, and then I've got one more question. When you have multiple lines exporting that have different HTS codes, how do you apply the inland freight cost that needs to be captured on the EEI filing?
I would say you can go ahead and prorate the values, based on the weight of the merchandise.
Okay, thank you. And if whoever submitted that question, if you guys do need further information, definitely email us about that.
Thank you, Kim. Going further in the USPPI, how we determine who is the USPPI? The USPPI is responsible, is the party receiving the monetary benefit from that transaction. So if I am the one that I'm selling overseas, chances are high that I'm the USPPI because I'm receiving the money from that transaction. It's also USPPI's responsibility to classify the commodity and obtain the appropriate license for export if needed. A common question that I see regarding the USPPI is that, can my freight forwarder be the USPPI? The answer is no. The freight forwarder cannot be the USPPI. However, they can file the EEI on behalf of the shippers if they provide you authorization to do so, but freight forwarders cannot classify the commodity on shippers' behalf, cannot be the USPPI on shippers' behalf. Here is a ER decision tree. It guides you on how they're determining if you might need a license for your type of product or not. If you want to ensure your classification, please contact the U.S. Department of Commerce. They will be most helpful for you and take a very deep look into your commodity and will be able to guide you through this process. It's very important to classify your product correctly. A very common questions we come across on a daily basis is harmonized code different than Schedule B? Yes, it is different. The Schedule B is also a 10-digit number, but is only used in United States. Was created by the Census Bureau with the Foreign Trade Department. The Schedule B is only to collect trade statistics for United States. While the harmonized tariff schedule, or HTS code, it was developed and is maintained by the World Customs Organization, WCO. and they are used for import and determining the duties of an import. Can I use the harmonized code instead of using the Schedule B? In 99% of the cases, yes. The 6 first digits from a Schedule B are pulled through the harmonized code system. They marry there. Very few commodities, the last 4 digits are different and might be unique to the Schedule B, but you can use the harmonized code instead of the Schedule B. If you're having a freight forwarder or a broker file the entry for you, just make sure you're telling them that you want to use the harmonized code rather than Schedule B.
And that search, that link we have there is really user friendly. I've used it myself many times. And additionally, we help out our clients daily on getting the Schedule B's numbers. It's something that we do on a daily basis and we're very good at. So you can certainly lean on the forwarder that you're working with, or lean on us to assist you in obtaining the proper Schedule B number.
Moving forward in our complying with USA export regulations, we see a lot of mistakes in this area. So what are the responsibilities as USPPI? So first of all, you need to determine commodity jurisdiction. There are several government agencies that control export goods. The first step is to find which one might control your product. So I have here some examples. EAR is the Export Administration's regulations. ITAR regulates the international traffic in arms. ATF controls alcohol and tobacco and firearms. NRC, Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Again, if you visited the Department of Commerce, they'll have a list of the agencies that your commodity may fall through, and they'll be able to guide you which are the correct agency you should obtain a license from. The second topic of a checklist, know your customer. As previously we discussed, do your due diligence to find out who you're selling to. It is the USPPI obligation to know who's the end user and why is the shipping and what it's going to be used to. There is a screen list on the BIS website that can be used as a tool. And make sure any document that you gather while you're trying to know your customer is safe. If an investigation go under for any reason, you have how to prove to the agency, the government, that you did your due diligence to know who the customer was. Third topic on the list is classify your product. As we just discussed previously, you must classify your product correctly. Fourth is file the EEI. USPPI can either file itself or can appoint a broker or a freight forwarder to file on their behalf. However, USPPI must provide the forwarder or the broker with the accurate information. Just don't think hiring a broker or forwarder will take the liability out of your shoulders, because it will not. If the forwarder files incorrectly, it's still USPPI responsibility. So making sure you're working with a reliable forwarder that knows what they're doing, that brings to the attention when red flags are raised, because it is your responsibility to file it correctly. Making sure information are being provided timely. For vessels and train departures, we have to file the EI 24 hours prior, 8 hours for aircraft and trucks. Make sure everything is being filed previously, the export. If your commodity has a value under 2,500 per Schedule B or a harmonized code, you're not required to file EI. Down on the list, maintain records. So keep your records for at least 5 years. Needs to be accessible upon request. So you can ask your broker or forwarder to provide a copy of the EAI filing so you can keep in your records. I'm sure if they're doing this for you, they will keep in the records as well, but be entitled to ask them to provide you a copy. They should be able to provide you. Now, a question that common is asked: if I file the EI incorrectly, what do I do? Make the change as soon as possible. Don't leave it as it is. It's better to fix after the cargo departed than never fix. So if the compliance team goes under an investigation and gets flagged for some reason, they account to you trying to fix the mistake more than if you did not try to do anything about it. So that makes sense.
Yeah, that's the best practice you mentioned about, obtaining the export information from the forwarder who filed it, through is really a good practice, because at the end of the day, if you tell them it's XYZ and they put in ABC, you can catch that on the fly if they're providing that information to you, and that catch measures are really important.
Okay, and then to go back to the other slide in speaking about EEIs, we had a question that came in. If the terms are X works, does a seller need to file the EEI?
Well, I think we're gonna talk a little bit more in the routed transaction. They do not require to file the EEI, but they need to provide information for the broker or the forwarder acting in behalf of the foreign part of interest to do so.
Okay, and then we had another question that came in, and I think that what they're trying to ask is, when completing the EEI, must we include the freight charges with the commodities?
You have to include the value that you disclose is the cost up to the port of departure. So for example, if your shipment, it costs you $5,000 and the cost to move that cargo to the port of departure is $500. So your total will be $5,500.
Okay, that is clear. Thank you.
Here is just a list that it's very helpful when going through export regulations. So feel free to use this checklist. Really ask the questions to you. Make sure you know the correct answer for each one of those. And I assure you, if you follow this checklist, you'll be compliant.
And I'll just also reiterate again, the fact that the BIS and the Department of Commerce, like Angelica had mentioned, are really there to help, and they do a great job. We've talked to them on behalf of some of our clients, and they're very knowledgeable and they're very, very helpful. At the end of the day, they want to promote exports themselves as well, so that's a great tool.
Thank you, Patrick. Another best practice is to add a destination control statement to your shipment documents, such as commercial invoice and packing list. This statement that you see in your screen is mandatory for items that are on the commerce control list. However, if you can add this statement to any of your shipments, it protects yourself in the event the merchandise gets resold at destination. So let's say you shipped a cargo from United States to UK. There's no license required. Everything was compliant. You're good to go. But unfortunately, the buyer in UK decided to ship this cargo to Iraq. So including that statement on your invoice enforces that you're trying to be compliant. That's what the US government wants to see from the shipper. We're going to move it forward, knowing destination constraints. I know that's hard to know in that destination countries regulations some of you work with several different countries. However, it's best practice to get familiar with some of the regulations before starting the exportation of the goods. So we suggest to work with a reliable freight forwarder with a global connection. So the freight forwarder should be able to flag at least a few of the regulations and the constraints that destination country offers. We also suggest to work with the buyer and making sure they have imported before and they are aware of their own country's regulations. So making sure buyer has imported license if required, making sure if they require any type of certificate or any other documents that we need for customs clearance at destination. So buyers should also do their due diligence to get the cargo in their country, and they should be guiding you. This counts as, again, towards the red flag. If they have no clue what they're doing, just question them, like, why haven't done this before? Like, how do you not know? Some of the types of certificates that we see that's very common is certificate of origin, health certificate for foodstuff, veterinary certificate, quality control certificate, free trade agreement. Some of the certificates, like the veterinarian certificate, they expires with 7 days, and I know for a fact it takes several weeks to obtain one. So make sure you have all your documents ready to go at the time this shipment leaves the United States, so you don't run in customs hold at destination. Be aware of packing regulations. Most of the countries nowadays, they do not allow a wood pallet that's not heat treated. We have run in some situations that we have to bring the empty pallets back because the shippers did not take the time to buy quality pallets, and they end up shipping without the heated treated stamp. Once the cargo gets there, customs says we're not accepting the pallets, needs to be shipped back. Some countries such as Australia and New Zealand, they do require fumigation. They do have the stink bug season through September and April. All the cargo, food containers, all CL, air freight needs to be fumigated prior departure. When you're buying your pallets, make sure your supplier have heated treated, and I see you guys see it on the screen, this heated treated stamp, making sure the stamp is on the pallet.
That really goes for any wood packaging material that you're loading. So if you're putting something in a crate, that obviously that wood crate needs to be stamped. And even if you're using some 2x4s to block and brace your cargo into an ocean container and such, those 2x4s need to be stamped and heat treated. We've seen some crazy things where just the blocking and bracing is not treated, but we got to bring all the cargo back from wherever it had to go.
An alternative, if you feel like the cost of heated treated is too much, you can use a plastic pallet. If your cargo the weight of your cargo allows you to do so.
As far as working with a reliable forwarder and in destination countries, just to show you where Scarborough is a part of 3 agent networks that give us global coverage. So if you had something going to Antarctica, we'd have a partner that we can bounce some things off for you on.
All right, so understanding routed transactions. I think that this is the most complicated questions that are coming through my desk every single day. When the term is export or F-term, shippers, they tend to think they're not responsible for providing any information, and that's not accurate. So there are 3 forms that grant authorization to a freight forwarder to transmit the EAI, which is automated export information. So one of them is the power of attorney. The power of attorney is just a form that it can be held during a period of time or until the shipper decides to revoke the power of attorney from the broker. The shipper letters of instructions, that is a form that's filled more in the case-by-case basis. So when we get a new shipment, usually the forwarder comes to you and asks, can you please file the SLI? So it gives me the authorization to file AI on your behalf, also provides me with the accurate information to do so. On the routed transactions, the broker should actually be looking for the FPPI form, which is when the foreign party authorizes the U.S. agents to facilitate the exports of items from the United States to prepare the EI filing. So in a quote-by-quote terms, the FBI is providing us the authorization to file the EI on their behalf. However, the USPPI responsibilities on routed export transaction is to provide name and address, tax ID number, where the cargo is origin from, the Schedule B or harmonized code, the commodity description, the total value that this commodity is being sold to, if this commodity was manufactured domestically or was purchased from another country, foreign destination, a ECCN if needed, or ER99, and if a license is required. So even though it's a routed transaction, you see the forwarders or broker is still asking you for an SOI, because the SOI provides you the accurate information to file the EI, and because it's the USPPI responsibility to provide all those information that's listed on your screen, it just makes more sense for us to go ask for that SOI. I think we had this question at the beginning of the seminar, like why is the X-work terms and we're still being asked the SOI? So that's really the reason. We're not getting a power of attorney from the USPPI to file the EI. We're getting from a foreign principal party, but the core information from the cargo still needs to come from the USPPI, because it makes sense that they're the ones who actually knows what the commodity is better than the one, and it's still export regulations for them to provide those information. It makes sense.
Yeah, when we do a ton of routed export transactions up here, and as Angelica said, I mean, it's practically how it works is you go to the shipper and you get that SLI and you get the information, and they give you the authorization to transmit the EEI information. Obviously we've done thousands of routed export transactions, and I don't think we've ever had one where we've got the documentation and information, and then the FPPI has supplied us with authorization to transmit the EEI. I don't think that's ever happened in one of the transactions that we've handled. We definitely run into situations where the USPPI does not want to provide the SLI, and in those situations, we then go overseas to get that authorization that we need from the FPPI.
Okay, I have a question here about SLIs and routed transactions. Are blanket SLIs acceptable and sufficient for regulatory compliance? What this attendee is saying is that they often find variance between supply chain parties on acceptance for that.
I'm not sure if I understand the question. It's like they're supplying their own shipping letter of instructions, or they're asking about, like, is there a form that a specific form that they need to fill?
I think what they're asking is if they can fill out one shipper's letter of instruction for all shipments moving forward.
Yes, they can do that. There is usually some SOIs, they do have a box where you can check as a regular shipment. So you can just have that on file and use it over and over and over. But that shipment must maintain like the same information over and over and over. Sometimes we do not do that very often because of the value change. Sometimes the harmonized codes change. And I mean, we as a forwarder, we're always going to come back to and just make sure it's actually accurate. So it can be done, but just have to be very consistent.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Moving forward, we'll be talking a little bit about preparing goods to reduce damage. It's very important that shippers bring to attention to their loading facilities and warehouse how to well prepare the goods for travel. Air freight pallets get consolidated with the other cargoes, usually stacked. Ocean freight, you have shifting throughout the transportation. So make sure your packages are tight, the boxes are full to the top to avoid crushing. I see that happening a lot. They do not put cushions or protection inside of the cardboard box. They overstack and cause damage during transportation, either in trucking, when you're loading in the container, or during water. So it's very important to prepare the goods accordingly. Anticipate your loading needs. Are you gonna need a forklift? Are you able to load the container in your facility yourself, or you don't have a dock? Just let whoever's dealing with the transportation, like, especially if it's the E-terms and the export terms, let the freight forwarder there reach out to collect the cargo. What's your need? So they can come in prepared to take care of you. Depending on INCOTERMs, anticipate your unloading requirements. If you're shipping in the DAP, DDP terms, make sure you have someone that will be taking care of unloading the cargo at destination, delivering at the door, because you're responsible for it. I have a lot of questions about E-terms. Is shipper responsible for loading the cargo in a truck? The answer, if you follow the INCOTERMs, is no. The buyer is actually responsible, but 99% of the time, the shippers load the truck, and we don't have any problems with that. But we have a few shippers that say, no, it's not my responsibility. You'll send your truck, and you'll send a driver that's gonna be able to load the truck itself. They do not want to take to that liability of loading the truck themselves. Know the size of the shipment and number of containers required. If you are unsure how many containers you need, provide us the dimensions. I'm sure the freight forwarder is willing to help you determine what's the best mode of transport for the quantity you have. For air freight, anything that's over 63 inches tall, you require a freighter. Anything that's under 63 inches tall, we can load in a passenger aircraft. The advantage is that passenger aircraft there's more routes, more flights, and rates are cheaper. So keep that in mind when you're creating your pallet for air freight. Strong enforcement of the wood packing, as we disclosed it before. If you feel like your weight permit, you can either use a plastic pallet. Make sure you're purchasing quality pallets, quality crating, so you eliminate and reduce the damage and claims during transportation. If you're loading container in your facility, make sure you take a pictures layer by layer of the container, you know, like stuff like half of the container, take a picture, you know, anything that covers you, and make sure like you did a good job of loading that container. Make sure you take a picture of the seal. If anything happens during transportation, the seal is broken, the container was open, is missing cargo, so you have a proof that it was sealed at origin. And apply identification labels. Make sure it's showing shipping from, going to, complete name, address. And cargo gets lost. Unfortunately, it does. And that helps a lot if you have that identification label. If you can go extra mile and take pictures of the pallet delivery facility, great. Not all the companies have this process in place, but that does short a lot of the period if the car gets lost on the trucking terminals or and during air freight transportation, gets misrouted for some reason. It just helps tremendously to locate it faster. Moving forward, documenting goods shipped. It's just like everything I just went through. Just take pictures, making sure all your documents that's been sending to overseas, commercial documents, commercial invoice, a packing list is that documented, and everything needs to be kept for at least 5 years. Anything that pretty much can cover yourself, it should be done here. When issuing your commercial documents, especially commercial invoice and packing list, make sure the information you have is consistent. More often, I see commercial invoices showing one weight, packing list showing different weight, two different INCOTERMs in the same commercial invoice, or two different INCOTERMs like packing list and commercial invoice. When the cargo gets overseas and customs gets those documents, like something not matching up here. Some countries are very aware of weight discrepancy, like INCOTERM discrepancy. One that I can cite off the top of my head is China and Brazil. So your car is going to be held for sure. Just making sure you read through your documents, everything is very consistent before you're going to go ahead. In case you're shipping samples or there's no monetary value to the cargo, or it's returning for repair, I get this question very often. Do I still have to put a value on the commercial invoice? The answer is yes. You always have to put a value on the commercial invoice, no matter what. And that value needs to be the correct marked value of the goods. That value is going to be only used for customs purpose. So you can add a note, value for customs purpose only. Because no matter, either if you're paying or not, someone will have to pay duties on that commodity, and customs needs that true value to determine how much the consignee or the shipper will be paying in duties and taxes. Making sure you have all your documents before exporting the goods. Like I said before, making sure all the certificate of origin, health certificate, and any other special documents that are necessary at destination, not only in the USA side, but at destination is squared out. Some of the documents take a long time to be able to put your hands on, so you don't want the cargo get stuck in customs, incurring demurrage and storage until the documents get sorted out.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Angelica and Patrick. For those of you that have submitted questions and that want to stay on the call, I think that if you guys don't mind, we'll go a little bit over. You're welcome to stay on. For those of you that want to drop off, this recording will get sent out. We have a full recording of the entire webinar, but we also splice up our webinars by question and answer and by topics throughout the subject. So you're welcome to go check that out when it gets sent to you via email. So since we were talking about documents, especially like when it comes to countries that are a little bit more difficult to ship to, is there a place where I can go find a list of required documents for each country?
I'll go ahead and take that the question. Unfortunately not. That would be incredible. I would love to have that, but no. It really comes down to the commodity you're shipping, and there's so many variables based on the different commodities and the different countries that there's really no such list out there that I'm privy to. And if I think it was out there, I'm pretty sure we'd have our hands on it.
Yes, we do get that question a lot, and I would love to be able to come up with a resource like that, but also, as regulations, as we know, just in the US, regulations are ever changing. So that's something that somebody would have to really stay on top of.
Good point.
Okay, so we have another question that just came in, and you guys are welcome to keep submitting your questions. If we can't get to them right now, we'll definitely contact you after this. We have a question from somebody that's, if a warranty replacement is over $2,500, do we still need to file an EEI?
I'll
Yes.
go ahead and respond to that.
Go for it.
Yes, we do. Any shipment leaving the United States that is above 2,500 per Schedule B or harmonized code, yes, we have to file EEI.
Okay, thank you. Another one. We receive a lot of requests for SLI documents on routed transactions. Why is that?
I think I could kind of cover that in that the routed export piece, but at the end of the day, you know, as a forwarder, we need the information to transmit the EEI. All information is off that SLI. If we received, you know, authorization from the FPPI, you know, at the time of booking, then we wouldn't require an SLI from the shipper. But as I mentioned, that never happens. So, you know, at the end of the day, as a forwarder, we have to have authorization to transmit the export clearance from someone, either the FPPI or the USPPI. And since we're here in the States and, you know, typically talking with the USPPI to arrange the movement of the goods, that's why the SLI is requested from the shipper.
Okay. When loading an export container, are we allowed to use a dunnage bag on a mixed load container?
Yeah, that'd be fine. You sure can. The safer
Okay.
the better.
Safer the better. Thank you. We've got two questions that are kind of related. So I'm going to kind of group them together. One is how do I find a company I can hire to export my products for me? And then the other one is, what are the best resources for new international business when you don't have an office or a reseller in the area? The customer always wants to have delivery as DDP, for example.
Okay. Well, let's take the first one first. How do I find a company I can hire to export my products for me? One little known fact is that companies that don't make products exported comprise the majority of exporting companies. So there's a lot of companies out there that are manufacturing products but are not being the exporter. So at the end of the day, really, if you want to be an indirect exporter, you can find, you know, export management or trade companies that you can work through to export your product. A lot of times they do that on a commission basis. Or you can find U.S. wholesalers that'll find you know, buyers for your product abroad. And then third, you can use the large online marketplaces like Amazon and eBay and such. You know, a lot of cases they'll take care of all of the export formalities and then just charge you in a, you know, nominal fee to do so. With those indirect methods of exporting, you know, the one thing you do lose out on though typically is you're not kind of capitalizing on you know other markets that your product may be able to be sold in. So that's one thing to bear in mind.
And just to add to that, a lot of countries have their own online like reseller platforms. So much like an Amazon, but it may be called something else in that country. So you definitely would want to talk to like export.gov, or even if you know somebody in that country to figure out where it is that goods can be found.
I think at the Census Bureau, they do have a very good platform online where you can look, you can literally type your commodity and they'll bring up the countries that usually are buying the type of commodity. It's a very user-friendly platform and it's free. So you can definitely contact them, go to their website, and it will be able to do so.
The other thing is if you're looking for like a reseller or distributor in another country, trade shows, that's a big thing that a lot of our clients go to find those. Okay, so let's see what time it is. I think that we've gone about 5 minutes over, and I do respect your guys' time. So any other question that you guys have for us, feel free to just reach out. Angelica, do you want to pull up the emails real quick on the next slide? And you guys are welcome to send in questions. If we did not get to your question right now, go ahead and re-forward the question, or if you're anonymous, go ahead and re-forward your question to us. Otherwise, we will reach out to you. And yes, we can provide proof of attendance. Please email me. This is Kim Taylor talking. Please email me direct for that, and I can get proof of attendance for coming to our webinar today. So guys, just look out in the next couple of days, and we'll get all the information out to you, and appreciate you guys attending and always supporting us. So have a great day. Thank you guys for speaking.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.